I've had a weird relationship with Vinland Saga ever since the first season came out about 4 years ago. When it was initially announced, and I was really excited for it. I thought, wow, this sounds like a really fantastic story. I really thought it was going to be a new favorite of mine. I thought I was going to adore it. And then when I finally watched it around the end of 2019 after it had finished airing, I was fairly disappointed because I could not stand Thorfinn specifically, but just the characters in general. It was a show that perhaps I had overly high expectations for. Maybe what I wanted out of it was never going to happen, and I should have had more of a measured approach to the show. But I didn't, and expectations are unfortunately not the easiest thing to always keep under control. Therefore, I was disappointed with Vinland Saga. I didn't hate it. I didn't think it was terrible. I still thought that the world was interesting. I still appreciated it for being this very unique type of setting and story that we just don't get in anime. But at the same time, I really just could not stand Thorfinn. I couldn't bear to watch this guy constantly just be annoying and complain and sulk. He just, even if you could understand where he was coming from after everything he had been through already, starting with him as a little kid, it just was not enjoyable to see him be so static for most of the show. And when that static aspect of him was not a likable character, it really did bring down the whole show, especially when most of the supporting characters were not particularly interesting or all that well handled either. And yes, Askeladd ended up becoming a really interesting character for around 2 or 3 episodes at the end of the season. And if Askeladd had been that interesting through the entire season, it probably would have changed my opinion on the show dramatically. And while I still appreciate what we got with Askeladd at the end, I just wish it had come sooner. I wish we had gotten more of it rather than him not really being all that interesting for the majority of the show. So I was left not really being all that thrilled with Vinland Saga by the time season 1 was over. And then when season 2 was announced, I really didn't have any expectations. I went from having super high expectations before season 1 to no expectations whatsoever for season 2. And because of that, season 2 ended up being a really, really pleasant surprise for me. Despite the fact that I've seen people be like, oh, what about the farming? The farming's so slow, the farming's so boring, which I feel like that complaint is kind of blown out of proportion, almost like you have more people worried about people complaining about the farming than people actually complaining about the farming. But I feel like Vinland Saga season 2 saved this show for me. This season did so much more with the characters, and I think just had a more pleasant setting. It was certainly different because there was significantly less conflict and fighting, at least overall. Certainly we get that throughout the season at important moments. And I'm just the kind of person who appreciates nice outdoor visuals, which we got in abundance this season, specifically because of the farming setting. But the characters really improve significantly. Thorfinn especially. I did not think it was possible to make me care about and like Thorfinn as a character, but this season managed to do it. Because it takes this guy who throughout season 1 had this one track goal of, I gotta kill Askeladd. And of course, he doesn't get to do that. So now he finds himself beaten down with really no reason to live and no goal for himself. He is just going through the motions of life now that he's a slave on this farm. And just, that's it. He doesn't care if he lives or dies. And we see that very apparently very early on in this season. But because of him getting to know Einar, someone who he will eventually see as a friend and a brother by the end of the season, who has a massive impact on him and allows him to gain a purpose in life again, to the point where by the end of the season, he has this very noble goal. Thorfinn turns into a renewed person, a renewed character who goes through such dramatic development that I can't help but say, yeah, I think Thorfinn now, after going through season 2, is a genuinely really good character. Someone who I could not stand, someone who I honestly just despised watching in season 1, is now a character who I appreciated seeing on screen. I love to watch his journey, going from someone who had this revenge as his only motivation in life to having no motivation in life to having to find and grow with a new motivation, one to found a country far off in Vinland that won't have slavery, that'll be a better place where this fighting doesn't need to happen. All of this culminates in that moment at the end of the season where Thorfinn confronts Canute and has his dramatic line of, I have no enemies, his refusal to fight, his willingness to get beaten to a pulp just so he can try and convince Canute not to continue to attack the farm. And it works. To see this guy who was so vengeance driven, so violent, who did so many evil, despicable things throughout his life, to see him recognize that and fear it and hate himself for it, but be able to pick up the pieces and say, I'm going to learn from this. I am going to make a place where this does not happen. It's remarkable. I would not have believed that Thorfinn could have so much development from where he was in season 1 if you told me about it prior to watching this season. I am thoroughly impressed that season 2 of Vinland Saga was able to do this with this character that I could not stand. And it's all because it crafted this arc that took us away from so much of what was in season 1, put us in this seemingly idyllic farm setting, had Thorfinn have to go through being a slave and ultimately come to realize, hey, the life I lived and the things I did were not okay. He is haunted by them. He is terrified of them, but he overcomes it. He has to live with it, but he's now doing something important with his life by the end of the season. And hopefully we will get future seasons to see what Thorfinn and Einar are hopefully able to accomplish in Vinland whenever they get there. Season 2 does a remarkable job of showing Thorfinn's character growth, of giving him a renewed sense of being, of showing that this show does not need to rely on overly gory, violent combat in order to be interesting, and giving the main characters a very noble goal of wanting to create a place where the horrors of the world that they live in, the violence, the fighting, the sacking, the slavery, the awful treatment that we do see as the show goes on. We see how awful being a slave is. Season 2 of Vinland Saga changed how I view this show, and it makes me actually look forward to whatever we might get in the future. Now, I'm going to have to remember, keep my expectations in check, because yes, I don't know how much of this is based on me having such low expectations for Season 2, but I'd like to think that's not the only reason why I enjoyed it so much more than Season 1. If for whatever reason you're worried about Season 2 because of the farming aspect, please don't. Everything Season 2 does, in my opinion, dramatically improves on what Vinland Saga was and allows it to become so much more than I ever thought it could have been. Season 2 of Vinland Saga saved the show for me. And while you may not need the show to be saved for you if you enjoyed Season 1, like I'd say the majority of people did, I believe this season will still enhance your opinion of the show and make you see it for so much more than it initially was with just Season 1. Truly, the farming arc was, so far at least, the best of Vinland Saga. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment, like, and subscribe. I appreciate it. Even if you don't necessarily agree with my opinion on Vinland Saga, I'd still like to hear what your thoughts are on it down below. Thank you again. Take care, everyone. Look forward to the next video.